Yes, everyone can listen to me. Okay, let's start with a little bit of introduction. In the Ecuadorian context, Ecuador educational authorities have invested in different projects as an effort to improve proficiency, the English proficiency in Ecuadorian, not only in the students, but also in the teachers. And we have, for example, the Cradle project that started from 1998 to 2012. And after that, we have the program Go Teachers, where some teachers pass some tests, and the best teachers, or the teachers that had the higher proficiency, were part of this interchange program where they spent 6 months or 1 year in the States in a type of immersion to increase their proficiency, not only to increase the proficiency, but also to learn some pedagogical instruction, to have some pedagogical instructions in the language. And then after that, there was a national testing in Ecuador. The TOEFL was the exam chosen for the teachers. Most of the teachers had a low level at that time. And after that, the government set some standards, which we are still using for our programs. There are standards for teachers, there are standards for students, and there is a national curriculum based on those standards. So even though all these efforts of the Ecuadorian government to increase the proficiency level of students, international reports indicate that the English level is still low. And from 2015 till now, instead of increasing, it is getting lower. So this master program, where these studies were taken from, started in 2017. The cohort of this year will be the 4th, and they have as a graduation work 2 choices. They can choose either to conduct an action research and report it in the form of an academic article, or they can also take a knowledge of theory and practice test. So from the first cohort, that were 60 candidates, 50 of them chose to conduct the action research. And from them, only 38 finished this process. The others are still in progress. From the second cohort, 68 out of 70 students chose the same option. So what we see is that the students are more engaged in developing this action research with their students and improve their teaching practices. So, are there related studies here in Ecuador? Meta-analysis of action research? No, they were not found. But there are this exploratory study that was conducted to know teachers' perspective in an instructional design class, and results indicated that the teachers they don't know their role in action research and the facilities of action research to improve instructional practices. So this might be before they implemented this action research. There are a lot of studies that recognize the impact of action research for improving classes, the quality in the class, quality of the teaching in the classes, and participants of this particular study were graduate students of an elementary education master's degree. There are meta-analyses conducted in Japan about data-driven learning, and in an ERIC search, there are 995 action research studies that have been conducted from 2001 worldwide. But when you add the word Ecuador, only 4 studies are in the list, and these are the authors of those studies. So as I said before, there are not similar studies meta-analysis of action research in Ecuador. So why action research? Well, according to these research reports, as there are a lot more benefits of action research, I just included this list. It involves practitioners to improve their working environment and the one of their students. It brings changes in a specific context. It develops some skills in the practitioners like careful planning, implementation, and critical reflection. It focuses on generating solutions, empowers the researchers, informs and builds theory, and also includes a cycle of plan, act, and observe. A cycle of plan, act and observe, reflect, revise a plan, and start again. And something that I'd like to include in this literature review is HEIS, as cited in WAC, says that teaching is improved when teachers assess their work and when they help students become their own teachers. So which were my research questions for this meta-analysis? Number one, I wanted to know to what extent will the implementation of action research impact learning? And the second question is which language skill will be more affected by action research? So this is a study in progress, and I am presenting now preliminary results. So what was the methodology? Well, there is a review of 40 studies that met the following criteria. 38 from the first cohort and 2 from this cohort, from the second cohort, sorry. So what was the criteria? They implemented an action research in EFL settings, and they included quantitative or mixed design instruments, and the practitioners used a lesson plan that included CLT activities and that used a backwards design template. So now the results of these. First, some demographic data of these studies. The total of participants, talking about the number of students that participated, the number of students of the teachers that participated in these studies, well, we have a total of 954 students. And their age I separated into these 5 categories. So children, 9%, preteens, 12.6%, teens, 39.3%, young adults, 39.1%, and only one student in her study said that there was one student that was 60 years old. So he is included in the young adults statistics, but I just wanted to point out that there was this specific case. So this action research was mostly implemented in high school and university settings, as you can see here, right? And the type of institutions, well, I categorized, or I divided these groups into public and private institutions. So if you can see, most of the students work in public institutions and 37% of them in private institutions. So at the level of institution, I wanted to provide statistics according to the number of students that were in this, because I had different numbers when I only included that the number of studies that were developing this. So I added better the number of students that were in these different institutions. So as you can see in this PowerPoint, and this can be confirmed with the previous slide, is that most of the students were in high school and university. Then it was followed by elementary school, language schools, and college. So what were the level of these? What was the proficiency level of these students? Pre-A1, that are mostly the students in in elementary schools, 5%. So most of the students are A1. Most of the students are in this range. And very few in B1. So according to the local authorities, students at the end of their high school, when they finish high school, they should demonstrate a B1 level. And when they enter in the university, or when they finish college, university, they're in the university studies, they should reach a B2 level. So these statistics confirm what the international reports say. Most of the students are in an A1 level. What was the focus of these studies in terms of the language skill? Most of the studies focus on speaking. And in another survey that I provide these participants, most of them said that this is a difficult skill for students. So the percentage is higher in that survey. So that survey also explained this one. Teachers think that speaking is a skill that they have to work on, and most of the teachers also say that in most of the studies, also speaking is like the skill that gets the most attention. And also in applied linguistics, the teacher said listening is the Cinderella skill. It is the Cinderella skill. There was only one student that worked with listening in the first cohort, and in the second cohort, there is also one student that wanted to had an implementation or work on improving listening in the students. And then we have reading and writing. What were the types of instruments that these studies applied? For this, I used the number of studies. So 35% use only quantitative instruments. And here I have to tell you that most of the students they get confused. They think they have qualitative information, but they report that qualitative information into quantitative, in quantitative terms. So they think it's qualitative, but it's not qualitative, but quanti. 57% of students, they use a mixed design, so quantitative and qualitative. And there were four students that had included a control group in their action research. So here the results of the strategy applied. Okay, in the first cohort, students focused on the skills. They said, okay, I want to improve listening by using pair work or group work, but when I made the analysis of what they really did, I classified them according to these strategies. So most of them work on collaboration, and they also work on peer feedback. And then we have also self-assessment, repetition, peer interaction, self-awareness, and you can see individual work. So repetition was in 2 cases or 3 cases, and it was mostly in speaking because the students were recording their audios and they had to repeat as many times as they felt it was okay for the teacher to assess that audio. And now, before I tell you the results, I have to share our experience. Like a prerequisite for students to enter in this process, they have to present their proposal, and it goes into an academic committee that accepts or says that they have to improve the proposal. After that, the students which proposals are accepted, they are assigned a person to help them in the design of their action research and in the writing of the paper. In this process, not only the tutor intervenes, but also two reviewers, and they go under a peer review process. So students get a lot of feedback during the process, before the implementation and during the implementation and after the implementation. Okay, now the results of the questions. To what extent will action research impact learning? I have this chart. Here I included the minimum of the effect size that from this study that was 0.22. The maximum, the highest effect size was 3.93. The mean of all these effect sizes was 1.76, and there is a standard deviation, a variation of these of 1.06. So in order to get these, I gathered all the effect size from all the studies and make this average, or translated this, exported these statistics to the SPSS program to get these descriptive statistics. So Cohen's D from 0.60 to 0.80 is strong according to this author, according to Salkin. And for Kulik and Kulik, they said that an effect size of 0.30 is moderate, but it is significant because it accelerates learning. Now, this 0.22 was in reading study that was conducted in a language school with 10 participants. Sorry, only 6 participants. And the level was A2, B1 according to the Common European Framework of Reference. So this was, so what I can notice, because the next one, let's say the lowest effect size was 0.40 in a speaking class, or in an action research that wanted to improve speaking, and that it was developed in a private school with 24 participants, and they were reported as being B1. So what I can tell is that the higher the proficiency, the lower the effect size. And I can tell that if I don't consider this, well, there is another study that had 0.45 in vocabulary for writing, and that was conducted in a language school with 10 participants. So what I can say is that the higher the proficiency, the lower the effect size. And if I don't consider these three very low results, I mean very low in terms of effect size, all others are from 0.75 and up. So considering that all of these effect sizes are strong and significant, and they accelerate learning. And it is important to mention that the p-value for all these studies was equals to 0.00. That means that they are statistically significant, and that all these excellent results were due to the implementation of the innovation or the strategy, and not to any other variable. So, the second question, which language skill will be more affected by action research? Here you have the results, but I can take listening as an outlier because there was only one study here, or I can combine listening and reading because they are both respective skills, and we have speaking and writing. Well, if we consider the mean of these effect size for these studies that were exclusively conducted to improve reading or speaking or writing or listening, we have that the one that was best impacted was reading. But there is not, I mean, there is not a big difference. They are mainly in the same, the same number, it's just decimals, the difference. Okay, here I just wanted to include this table that I found very interesting, the correlations between the different variables. And you have the variable one is the type of institution, if it was public or private, the skill, listening, speaking, reading, writing, number of students, age, the type of institution in terms of elementary, high school, university, or language school or college. And the design, if it was quantitative, qualitative, I mean, quantitative or mixed, and the effect size of the studies, the proficiency of the students, and the strategy. I put it active learning, but it's not active learning, it's the strategy that the teachers use. So you see this, and you see this note, correlation is significant at the 0.05 level, and it's where you see this. So when you have all these correlations and you see this, it's because it is significant at the 0.05 level, and if you have two of them, then it is significant at the 0.01 level. So it is, the significance is greater. So here you have, well, this is not, I didn't highlighted this one because it's the type of school, elementary or elementary, high school, university, with the age. So of course there is a strong correlation there. Here it's the age and the type is the same, So let's not pay attention to that one. But here in effect size, if you see in effect size, I can mark here effect size, but it's the variable 7. So there are correlations of the effect size and the public, and if the institution is public or private. So it seems in private schools there is a small effect size, but in public school is different. It's greater effect size. And there are good correlations here, but I'm not going to explain those in details. I will explain that later why. But it is important to see the different correlations here, and they are significant at the 0.05 level. And of course, this analysis will be expanded with the new results of the cohort that is currently conducting their action research. So what can I tell you in the discussion is that the description of action research as explained by parents, yes, it affected not only the practitioners, but also the institution in the following aspects. So for practitioners, it improved their working environment and results in the language skill that was interviewed. I can say that most of the students were surprised by the engagement of their students in this program. And like at the beginning, some of them had problems. They reported problems because they said that it was not only the level, but also the study habits that the students do not have. And well, for the practitioners also, they started developing skills like planning with this pathward design, and also looking for reliable resources. And they improve in their academic writing, they improve in creating instruments and interpreting, but of course, interpreting the results, and also in a very beginning level, their critical reflection. And it addressed a difficulty their students struggle with their L2, so they solved that problem, or at least they started with a solution. And they also follow that spiral cycle. That means that they are going to, in their academic writing. Why? Because they have constant, as I said before, they have constant feedback in the document. The tutor has to like give the green light when to the evaluators. So when the tutor says, okay, this document is ready for evaluation, then the reviewers come into action, they read the document and provide more feedback. But this document was developed in two phases. The first one was when, like, prior to the implementation. So in this case, they had to look for literature that supported their study. For related studies, they need to include the instruments because we wanted to make sure that they are testing what they are saying they are testing, and they had to include the lesson plan. It was important that students had the lesson plan, that we see what the evidence of this action research or the implementation, the innovation that they wanted to implement. Now, in this second cohort, well, if you see in the next one, for the institution, there were changes made in the program to make action research more reliable and valid. For example, we have asked students, because of the previous excellent results, we have asked students to make tests that are more reliable according to the level, and we have included a higher, not only according to the level of the students, but include one piece of a higher level to see if they can do that. And an experience is that one student already reported that students focus on that higher level test, and they didn't pay attention to the test that was of their level. They pay attention more of the higher level than they had excellent results in their higher level test. And well, in the faculty, another change that we made in the program is that we provide faculty with a specific content, we provide with the specific needs and skills that students need in order to support the graduation work that is, well, especially for the ones that are conducting this action research. The mean effect size of this study, which means a large impact for learning, may address also have this statement of improved teaching by assessing my teaching. That students saw the results with this design or including quantitative and qualitative instruments. Quantitative instruments were pre-post test, surveys, checklists, and some of the qualitative instruments were field notes, interviews, and learning logs, open questions like interviews, a type of interviews, but they were surveys. So they use all that data to include or to come to conclusions. So what is the conclusion of this meta-analysis in this beginning stage? Is in order to assist the governmental efforts of increasing the proficiency level in students, we think that this data is consistent, that when teachers become researchers, they accelerate learning. Why? Because the process of this action research, like starting from a problem, being informed of how to address that problem in the literature review, and then implemented the innovation with a backwards design model that we are, well, that was the design or the template that we use here. And also the combination of CLT activities, the combination of all these elements might have affected this large effect size that we have found in this meta-analysis. And implementing action research and reporting the results in peer review process has benefits not only for the teacher practitioners, but also for their students in a great extent. And something that I didn't write here, but that I consider it is important, is that these studies are highly public. They can be published because there was one that was sent to a journal and it was accepted with very few minor observations. And they will be published in a book. 12 of these studies will be published in a book. And the others, we are assisting the students to publish their papers. Recommendations and limitations. This meta-analysis was limited to determining the impact of action in research by considering just the effect size of the results of all these studies. So what I recommend to future researchers that would like to have more in-depth information of this is a qualitative study to know from the practitioner's perspective the difficulties in the process and their gains in terms of professional development. A qualitative study that is conducted to know the perspective not only of the practitioners, but also of their students, an exploratory study to determine which of the elements in the process impacted more in practitioners. As I told you, which, I mean, the tutors, the reviewers, the feedback of the reviewers, the guidelines or the feedback of the tutor, their classes in the program, or like the implementation itself, the lesson plan, the communicative activities, what had the highest impact here for them. And also, it can be a descriptive study of this process and exploring more in-depth the correlations found in this study. So now I am suggesting an expert in correlations, so they can conduct a correlation study to know more in depth of these correlations, how they are, because they are, as we notice in the table, they are significant to a 0.0.5. And these are my preferences. So now I am open to the questions. Do you have questions? Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Rosanna. We do have one question, and it is from Karen. And she's asking, what do you think that the higher the proficiency level, the lower the effect size?
Okay, I think, and that is a correlation, I think that it is because the higher the proficiency level, because of the proficiency, it's like there is not much improvement because they are still proficient. So it is like from B1 moving to B2, but from A1 students, it's like they are mostly, they are very engaged in the program, in the process, and also the activities that they have done. So the impact, and you can see a high impact like right away. But for this A2, B1, maybe the type of the content, or because of the level that it is high. So yes, that is a good question, and that's why I'm suggesting in my limitations to make other researchers to make an exploratory study to go more in depth in these correlations.
Thank you. We have another question from Karen as well, and she says, how did you determine that critical reflection was starting to improve? And also, what is the spiral cycle in academic writing?
Okay, well, the first question, that is the beginning critical reflection, because I can notice in the writing, in their literature review, because there was in our rubric a sentence that says the critical review of these studies, and there was a very low percentage of the students, a very low number of students that really had a critical writing or a critical study reflection of these, combining these authors of the other studies. So that's why I think it's, well, in terms of the literature review, it's very elementary or beginning. But in terms of their reflection in the action research, also the tendency was, okay, like focusing on the quantitative data, like, okay, the students improved because we have these good results, but I think in the first cohort, we missed to ask more information from the students' perspective on telling us what really, like more of how the teaching or how these excellent results evolve from the beginning till the end. And that is something that we implemented in the second cohort. Now we are asking the students not only to know from their students, like from elementary, high school, university students' perspective, because that was another question, what was the perspective of the students toward these different innovations, and we have excellent results, positive results. All the students agree that they like their peer feedback, the self-feedback, the use of the rubric, the use of repetitions, I mean, recording their voices. Oh, something that I didn't mention before is that 90% of these studies use technology. So in a way, they use Google Drive, they use Google Drive Docs, Google Drive Excel, they use the mobile devices, they use Padlet, Quizlet, Boki, Bubbly, and other applications and platforms like Schoology and Moodle. I think that their critical analysis, I think it is at an elementary level, and we are working on improve that. And the second question, can you repeat the second question, Nancy, please? Because it was the critical analysis and the spiral cycle of the writing process. Well, if we compare the first draft, the very first draft that they sent to the tutor, and we compare that to their final document, the improvement is like 360 degrees in most of the cases. Of course, there are some exceptions, but there is an improvement even from the reviewers. I mean, because as I said, this process starts with the tutor that is with them during the whole process, but at some point, two reviewers come into action and they provide feedback. So if you notice the first document and the last document, there is a lot of improvement. So this is a spiral, because they go back again to the document, they improve the document, send it again, receive feedback, and keep improving the document, and they do this up until the end, until the document is graded. And still, it is, of course, it has some aspects that can be improved, but it is an acceptable document at the end. And as I said, they are all ready to be published. Is there any other question?
No other questions at this time. So do we want to give it another minute and see if anybody has more questions?
Sure. I don't have any problem waiting. I don't know if Miss Karen is still there, and if she was like have a feedback of my answers, or if she wants to add something else.
Well, there's no more questions at this time. Oh, I think actually Karen just posted another comment here. She says she's still thinking about the proficiency level effect size relationship, but she doesn't know. But don't have another question yet.
Just thinking about the proficiency. Well, I think that the lower level is the higher the impact, and that is what the correlation says. Let me see, let me go back to the correlation slide. I can go back to this. Okay. So if you have here the proficiency and the effect, the proficiency is variable 8 and the effect size is variable 7. Six and 8, so there is a high, and it is a high, there is a high correlation, but it's negative. That means the lower the level, the higher the impact. The higher the level, the lower the impact. But yes, of course, I think this is all this table is rich information for another study.
Well, thank you very much, Rosanna. And with that, we must conclude today's online program. Today's presentation was titled Meta-Analysis of Action Research Studies at a University in Ecuador. A special thank you to our presenter, Maria Rosana Ramirez. This concludes the program. You may now disconnect. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.